Hello and welcome to Persuasive Speaking. In this lecture, we are going to be talking about developing and presenting a persuasive speech. So let's get started, shall we? The purpose of a persuasive speech is to influence your audience's attitudes, beliefs, or actions. So it goes beyond informing and it is to motivate change. So, an example is inform would be what climate change is, but to persuade would be why we must act against climate change now. It's just an example, but you see the difference. A persuasive speech is to convince your audience to do something. Now, there are characteristics of persuasive speeches. It requires credible evidence, and you combine though it with logic, emotion, and appeals. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a minute. You must address your audience values and resistance, meaning that if you if your audience, let's say, is for, meaning that they are convinced that global warming is real, this is just an example, then you are persuading them, but you might be persuading them to do something, but you don't have to persuade them that it's real. Do you see? And then you must build trust through ethical communication. Now, there are types of persuasive speeches. There are questions of fact. Is it true? Um, does mediation reduce stress? So that's a question, right? Is it true? Is global warming real? Is it a fact? True or false? And you have to determine that in your speech. Then there are questions of value, right or wrong. Should Is it right to pay athletes in college? Is it wrong to pay athletes in college? And so that is a speech about the right or wrong of paying athletes. And then there are questions of policy. What should we do about something? Should voting be mandatory? Should voting be voluntary? And that would be a policy question. Now, there are ways to persuade. It's called the persuasive appeal, and Aristotle is credited with this particular theory. And it says that a good persuasive speech should include ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is credibility and trustworthiness, right? Logos is logic, reasoning, statistics. And pathos is emotion, vivid language, making your audience feel something. So, an example is a charity speech that uses all three appeals. Now, there are organizational patterns for persuasive speeches. So there's one called the problem and solution. And this organizational pattern is where you define the problem and you propose a solution. Then there's cause and effect. So you show how something leads to an outcome. So something caused something, and this is the effect of it, and here's the change you want made. And there's another organizational pattern, the comparative advantage. Why one option is better than another. So you compare two things and you tell your audience why one option is better than another. Maybe it's two cars, maybe it's two phones. Think about it like that. Then there's something called the Monroe's motivated sequence. It's 5 steps. This is where initially you get your audience's attention. And then you appeal to your audience's need, and then you provide the satisfaction, and then you help them to visualize what that would look like, and then you have them take action. So the attention is to get your audience's attention, which means, do you want to hear more? So you give your audience something to make them want to listen some more. And then the need in the sequence is to put across the problem. And so you want your audience to agree that there is a problem. And then the satisfaction is how you can help them solve the problem. I understand your solution. I get behind your solution. And then visualization, show the benefit of the solution. I absolutely agree with your solution. And action is to drive your audience to do something. I will do whatever it is that you have said in order to solve this specific problem. That's where you want your audience to be. And that's the sequence explained. So, how do you overcome the resistance that your audience might have? And this is the difficult part because you may not do it in one speech. But remember, you're not always there to get them to do something right there on the spot. You want to get them to think about it so that at some point they may make a different decision. So you help them to recognize the opposing viewpoints. You use two-sided arguments when you are doing a persuasive speech. You establish common ground. So you establish the fact that, listen, we can meet in the middle somewhere. Then you gradually build action steps, right? So, building credibility in persuasion. You've got to be competent. It's got to be well researched and well organized. Your character has got to be there. Your audience has got to believe or think that you're ethical and trustworthy and that you are the person that can present this information to them. And then there's dynamism. And that means that you're confident, you're energetic in your delivery. Okay, and so an example is when you have a confident delivery, it enhances the persuasion. Wouldn't you agree? Now, have you heard of logical fallacies? Well, here are the logical fallacies to avoid. One is called an ad hominem, and that is where you want to avoid attacking a person, right? And so you want to not necessarily attack anything. You want to make sure that you are not seeming like you're against a person. And then there's bandwagoning. And this is where you say, well, everyone does it. There's no such thing as everyone and no one because there are no absolutes. So avoid bandwagoning. And then there's the false dilemma. And this is where only two options are given. And so you may give two options, but you may tell your audience that there are others, but you want to convince your audience that your option is the best option. And then there's hasty generalization. And this is when you generalize things by providing too little evidence, right? Um, and then you say something like, let's use an example like, well, you should vote because all smart people do. Do all smart people vote? No. Now, be ethical, be truthful and accurate. Respect your audience's ability to decide. And if they decide against what you're saying, respect that. Avoid manipulation or coercion. And so present both benefits and risks, let's say, of a treatment. That's an example. And let your audience know what they are. And then give your audience an opportunity to decide. So, what are the key takeaways in this lecture on persuasive speaking? Well, persuasion motivates towards change. That's what you're doing with a persuasive speech. There are types of persuasive speeches, such as a fact speech, a value speech, or a policy speech. And there are appeals, such as Aristotle's ethos, pathos, and logos. And your persuasive speech should have strong organization. It should be ethical and credible in order to have impact. Now, if you can embrace these things, you will find that you will have a more effective persuasive speech. Thank you for listening, and take good care.